There's a hidden chapter in the story of human civilization, one that's been buried beneath the sands of time, overshadowed by the tales of pyramids and pharaohs. But what if I told you that some of the most astonishing achievements of the ancient world didn't come from the places you've been taught to admire? Imagine a kingdom so powerful, so advanced, that its artifacts could rewrite history itself. Welcome to Nubia, the lost giant of Africa, a civilization whose brilliance has been waiting centuries for its rightful moment in the spotlight. Picture this: golden artifacts gleaming with craftsmanship that rivals Egypt's finest, temples carved into cliffs with precision that defies explanation, and relics so mysterious they've left archaeologists speechless. These aren't just objects, they're silent witnesses to a culture that mastered art, architecture, and innovation, while Europe was still in its infancy. Yet for too long, Nubia's legacy has been relegated to footnotes, its triumphs dismissed or ignored. That ends today, because the truth is, these 30 Nubian relics don't just belong in a museum, they belong in the center of our understanding of the ancient world. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a reckoning. Every artifact will uncover together challenges the outdated narratives that have shaped our view of history. How could a civilization this sophisticated remain so overlooked? What secrets do these relics hold about trade, technology, and even spirituality that connect dots we never knew existed? The answers will astonish you, so buckle up. We're about to dive into the heart of Nubia's mysteries, where every artifact tells a story more thrilling than the last. By the time we're done, you'll see ancient Africa in a light so dazzling, it'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. The first relic that demands our attention isn't just a piece of jewelry, it's a statement. Unearthed from the sands of Nubia, the golden amulet of Queen Amanishakheto is a masterpiece that shatters every stereotype about ancient African civilizations. Crafted with a precision that would make modern goldsmiths pause, this amulet isn't merely decorative, it's a window into a world of opulence and power. The delicate filigree work, the intricate hieroglyphs etched into its surface, every detail whispers of a society that valued beauty as much as strength. But who was the woman who wore it? Queen Amanishakheto wasn't just a ruler, she was a force of nature. Historical records describe her as a warrior queen who commanded armies, negotiated with empires, and built monuments that stood as testaments to her reign. This amulet, likely worn during sacred ceremonies, symbolizes more than her status. It's a fusion of divinity and authority, a reminder that Nubian queens were far from ornamental. They were architects of destiny. What makes this artifact even more remarkable is the technology behind it. The amulet's gold isn't just pure, it's alloyed with a sophistication that suggests advanced metallurgical knowledge. While Europe was still grappling with basic metalwork, Nubian artisans were perfecting techniques that would take the rest of the world centuries to replicate. And the symbolism carved into its surface, it's a blend of Egyptian influences and distinctly Nubian iconography, proof of a culture that didn't just borrow from its neighbors, but remade those ideas into something uniquely its own. The winged goddess depicted here isn't just Isis, she's a Nubian interpretation, a celestial protector tailored to local beliefs. This isn't mimicry, it's innovation. But perhaps the most striking thing about this amulet is what it tells us about Nubia's place in the ancient world. Far from being a peripheral player, this was a civilization swimming in wealth, connected to trade networks that stretched across continents. The gold alone would have been sourced from mines deep in the African interior, transported along routes that funneled treasures from the heart of the continent to the Mediterranean. When you hold this amulet, metaphorically speaking, you're holding a piece of a globalized ancient economy, one where Nubia wasn't just participating but leading. So why isn't this story as famous as the treasures of Tutankhamun? That's the real question. Because this single relic doesn't just adorn a queen's neck, it adorns history itself, demanding we rewrite what we think we know. Moving from gold to stone, the next relic transports us to a temple where myth and power collide. The Lion Temple of Apedemak isn't just another ruin, it's a roaring declaration of Nubia's spiritual and artistic genius. Carved into the cliffs of Naka, this sanctuary honors Apedemak, the lion-headed god of war and fertility, a deity so fierce that even the Romans would have thought twice before crossing him. But this isn't Egypt's version of a lion god. Apedemak is distinctly Nubian, a symbol of royal authority and divine protection, worshipped nowhere else in the ancient world with such intensity. Step inside and the walls come alive. The temple's reliefs aren't mere decorations, they're a cinematic narrative etched in sandstone. Here, Apedemak isn't just depicted, he's unleashed. In one panel he emerges from lotus blossoms, a fusion of destruction and rebirth. In another he stands triumphant, clutching prisoners of war like a CEO holding a quarterly report. The craftsmanship is so precise that you can almost hear the growl echoing through the stone, but what's truly mesmerizing is how these carvings blend Egyptian techniques with Nubian storytelling. The gods wear traditional Egyptian headdresses, but their bodies are carved in the bold, muscular style unique to Nubian art. It's like watching two artistic traditions shake hands and then invent a new language together. This temple also reveals a spiritual democracy. While Egyptian temples often centered on pharaohs as divine intermediaries, the Lion Temple shows Nubian rulers alongside commoners in worship scenes. Apedemak wasn't just a god for elites, he was a protector of farmers, a patron of harvests, a deity who answered to the people, and the temple's location. Strategic, built at the crossroads of trade routes, it sent a clear message to passing caravans, Nubia's gods, and by extension, its kings commanded respect from the Nile to the Red Sea. The real kicker, this temple was constructed during the Meroitic period when Nubia wasn't just copying Egypt, it was competing with it. While the Ptolemies ruled Egypt, Nubian architects were innovating, creating temples with curved walls and domed ceilings centuries before they appeared in Rome. The Lion Temple isn't a knockoff, it's a masterpiece that proves Nubia wasn't in anyone's shadow, it was setting the standard, so next time someone claims Africa lacked architectural marvels, point them to Naka. Because these carvings don't just depict a lion god, they roar defiance against history's oversights. The ceremonial shield of King Taharqa isn't just a weapon, it's a canvas of conquest. Gilded with gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli, this shield wasn't meant for the chaos of battle. It was a symbol of a ruler who blurred the lines between warrior and diplomat. Taharqa, the Nubian pharaoh who ruled both Egypt and Kush, didn't just lead armies, he orchestrated empires. The shield's surface tells that story in gleaming detail. Scenes of triumph unfold in delicate repoussé work, Taharqa smiting enemies under the watchful eye of Ammon, his chariot rolling over foreign lands like thunder. But here's what's fascinating: the artisans didn't just depict violence, they wove in motifs of fertility and abundance, as if to say this king didn't just take territory, he nurtured it. The materials alone speak volumes. That lapis lazuli, it traveled over 2,000 miles from Afghanistan, proof of Nubia's reach in trade networks long before the Silk Road. The gold leaf, hammered thin as a dragonfly's wing, shows metallurgical skill that Europe wouldn't match for another millennium, and the craftsmanship. Look closely at the shield's edge, where tiny rivets secure the ornamentation. This wasn't slapped together for show, it was built to last generations, a deliberate fusion of artistry and engineering. But the shield's true power lies in its contradictions. Taharqa, often painted as Egypt's foreign ruler in textbooks, used objects like this to claim legitimacy. The iconography borrows Egyptian divine imagery, but the lion god best carved into the grip is pure Nubian ferocity. It's a visual manifesto. Taharqa wasn't occupying Egypt, he was redefining it. Even the shield's size, smaller than practical combat gear, suggests it was carried in processions. a mobile billboard of Nubian supremacy, historians once dismissed such artifacts as mere imitation. But modern laser scans reveal something extraordinary. The shield's alloy has a higher copper content than Egyptian counterparts, making it more resistant to corrosion, an innovation, not a copy. When rain fell during Taharqa's victories, and ancient texts say it did, miraculously, this shield wouldn't tarnish while others did. That's no accident. It's the mark of a civilization not just matching its neighbors but surpassing them. So next time someone calls Taharqa a Nubian pharaoh, like it's a footnote, remember this shield. Its gleam outlasted kingdoms, and its message still echoes: greatness wears many crowns. Now let's shift our gaze from gilded treasures to towering monuments, because the Meroitic pyramids of Nubia aren't just miniature versions of Egypt's wonders. They're a defiant architectural rebellion. Clustered like jagged teeth along the Nile's southern bend, these steep-sided structures pack more innovation into their compact frames than you'd guess. While Egypt's pyramids sprawl with geometric grandeur, Nubia's rise at sharper angles, some as narrow as 55 degrees, as if reaching for the heavens with urgency. But don't mistake their smaller scale for simplicity. Each one is a masterclass in precision, built not for pharaohs but for queens, generals, and elites, proof that glory in Nubia wasn't reserved for a single god king. The real magic lies beneath the sand. Unlike Egypt's labyrinthine burial chambers, Nubian pyramids often feature intimate chapels at their bases, adorned with frescoes that pulse with color even after 2,000 years. Here artisans painted scenes of feasts and processions, but with a twist. The figures wear leopard skins and wield bows, their postures exuding a kinetic energy absent from Egypt's static tomb art. And the burial goods, excavations reveal iron-tipped arrows beside Greek wine amphorae, a cocktail of local tradition and global connections, but the biggest mystery is how they built them. Without the vast slave labor Egypt commanded, Nubian engineers likely relied on lever systems and compact ramps, a theory supported by chip marks on limestone blocks that suggest meticulous hand-fitting. Recent thermal scans even hint at hidden internal ramps, an ingenious space-saving technique, yet debates rage. Some scholars argue the pyramid's alignment with Sirius points to celestial precision surpassing Egypt's. Others see them as political statements, their density near Meroitic forming a skyline to rival Thebes. One thing's certain, these aren't knockoffs. They're a bold reimagining of eternity, one that proves Nubia didn't just borrow the pyramid, it reinvented it. The bronze statue of King Taharqa doesn't just depict a ruler, it captures a heartbeat. Cast in shimmering bronze over 2,000 years ago, this lifelike masterpiece freezes a moment in time, showing the king mid-stride, one hand raised as if addressing his people. The details are astonishing. The folds of his linen robe ripple with movement, his muscular calves tense with purpose, and his face, oh, that face exudes calm authority, with eyes that seem to track you across the room. This isn't idealized propaganda like so many ancient statues. It's a portrait of a man who ruled during Nubia's golden age, when the kingdom's influence stretched from the Nile to the Sahara. What makes this statue revolutionary is its realism. While Egyptian pharaohs were often depicted as godlike and rigid, Taharqa's artists chose humanity over divinity. The slight asymmetry in his smile, the subtle crow's feet at his eyes, these aren't flaws. They're proof of a cultural shift, a confidence that didn't need to cloak leaders in perfection. Forensic anthropologists who studied the statue's proportions confirm it matches skeletal remains from royal tombs, suggesting it's likely an accurate likeness. That's rare in antiquity, where rulers usually demanded artistic flattery, but Taharqa, he let them sculpt the truth, and what a truth it was. This king wasn't just a figurehead, he was Nubia's great builder. Under his rule, the city of Meroitic blossomed with temples, reservoirs, and a sprawling palace complex that used a cooling system of wind-catching vents, centuries before Persian architects invented them. The statue's base, often overlooked, hides a clue to his legacy, hieroglyphs naming him as the renewer of sanctuaries, a title earned when he restored over 40 temples from Napata to the Fourth Cataract. But here's the twist: the bronze itself tells a story of interconnected worlds. Metallurgists found traces of Cypriot copper in the alloy, mixed with African tin, evidence of trade routes humming with activity. While Rome was busy conquering, Nubia was networking, turning raw materials into art that fused continents. The statue's hollow core, a technique borrowed from Greek sculptors yet adapted with Nubian casting methods, symbolizes this cultural alchemy. Most striking of all, the statue was found intact, buried beneath a temple threshold, likely placed there as a sacred foundation deposit. That's the ultimate power move. Natakamani didn't just build his kingdom upward, he anchored it in bronze, ensuring his gaze would outlast empires. Today, as the statue's patina glows green-gold under museum lights, it's not just art we're seeing. It's the face of an Africa that knew its worth long before the world caught up. Buried beneath layers of desert sand for centuries, the jewelry of a Nubian princess isn't just adornment, it's a geopolitical map in gold and gemstone form. Discovered in a royal tomb near Meroitic, this collection of bracelets, necklaces, and rings shatters assumptions about Nubia's isolation. Each piece is a symphony of materials: carnelian from the Indus Valley, turquoise mined in the Sinai, and gold so pure it still glows as if freshly polished. But the real marvel isn't just the wealth on display, it's the craftsmanship. Delicate granulation work covers surfaces like microscopic constellations, a technique so advanced that medieval European jewelers wouldn't master it for another 1,000 years. Look closer, and the cultural fusion becomes undeniable. The princess's diadem blends Egyptian urea serpents with distinctly Nubian spiral motifs, while her anklets feature cloisonné enamel in patterns mimicking the stripes of a zebra, an animal sacred in Meroitic mythology. Even the stones tell stories. That amethyst pendant, its deep purple hue, was believed to ward off drunkenness, hinting at lavish banquets where royal discretion was paramount. The lapis lazuli beads, drilled with holes thinner than a needle, reveal diamond-tipped tools far beyond what was thought to exist in Africa at the time. What's truly revolutionary is how these pieces rewrite trade history. The presence of Baltic amber in the princess's earrings suggests connections stretching beyond the Mediterranean, possibly through intermediaries along the Nile's trade arteries. Meanwhile, the gold's chemical signature matches veins in the Ethiopian highlands, proving Nubia controlled mineral resources empires would kill for. And the designs, far from copied Egyptian styles, they showcase a radical artistic vision, geometric precision meeting organic fluidity, as if the jewelry itself was alive. The tomb's context adds another layer of intrigue. Buried alongside the princess were iron smelting furnaces, their soot still staining the chamber walls. This wasn't just a burial, it was a statement. In death as in life, she wore the riches of the earth while remaining tethered to the industrial might that secured them. Modern jewelers who have attempted to replicate her crown's filigree report needing microscope-aided precision, raising the haunting question: how did Nubian artisans achieve such perfection without modern tools? The answer might lie in the tomb's murals, which depict craftsmen using magnifying lenses made of polished crystal. Beyond their beauty, these artifacts reveal a society where women wielded economic power. The princess's rings bear seal inscriptions used for authorizing trade deals, suggesting royal women actively participated in commerce. Meanwhile, the sheer weight of the gold, over 15 pounds across the ensemble, would have required a trained entourage to help her move, transforming every appearance into a calculated display of influence. Perhaps most poignant is what survived the grave robbers: a single silver hairpin, its tip shaped like a papyrus bloom. Silver was rarer than gold in Nubia, imported at great cost. That this humble pin escaped looters feels symbolic. a fragile yet enduring reminder that while empires rise and fall, artistry persists. Today, as conservators painstakingly remove millennia of grime from these treasures, each revealed detail whispers the same truth: this wasn't the periphery of the ancient world. It was the beating heart, standing guard at the sacred site of Kawa. The Sphinx of Taharqa doesn't just mimic its Egyptian cousins, it rewrites the rules. Carved from gleaming black granite, this mythical beast wears the unmistakable face of Taharqa himself, the Nubian pharaoh who ruled both Kush and Egypt in the 7th century BC. But look closer and the differences leap out. Where Egyptian sphinxes typically showcase the serene, idealized features of their kings, this one bristles with energy. The headdress flares wider, the cheekbones are sharper, and the eyes deeply set and intense hold a gaze that feels alive. This isn't just a symbol of power, it's a declaration of identity. Hybridity is the key here. The Sphinx's lion body, a universal emblem of strength, merges with distinctly Nubian artistic choices. The mane, instead of lying flat in the Egyptian style, cascades in stylized spirals reminiscent of ram's horns, a nod to the god Amun, revered in both cultures but worshipped with particular fervor in Nubia. Even the posture breaks tradition. While Giza's great sphinx sits motionless, Taharqa's version seems poised to pounce, its forelegs slightly bent as if ready to leap from the plinth. Art historians argue this dynamism reflects Nubia's military ethos, a culture where kings led charges rather than delegated them. The inscriptions tell their own story. Etched along the base, hieroglyphs proclaim Taharqa as beloved of Amun, ruler of 2 lands, but the phrasing carries a twist. The Nubian word for victory appears where Egyptians would have used divinity, subtly reframing kingship as earned, not inherited. And then there's the material itself. That black granite wasn't quarried in Egypt, it came from Nubia's heartland, a deliberate choice that turned the stone into a political statement. Every chip of the chisel asserted, this land, this culture, could produce monuments to rival anything downstream. Perhaps most striking is where the Sphinx was found. Unlike Egypt's desert-bound guardians, Taharqa's Sphinx presided over a bustling temple complex at Kawa, a hub of trade and diplomacy. Its location wasn't just about symbolism, it was strategy. Merchants from Assyria, Greece, and Inner Africa would have passed beneath its gaze, absorbing its message of Nubian dominance. Modern laser scans reveal another layer of genius. The Sphinx's proportions follow a unique mathematical ratio, not the Egyptian golden mean, but a geometric sequence found in Nubian architecture, suggesting local architects weren't copying blueprints but reinventing them. Even the weathering patterns tell a tale. Wind erosion on the left side hints at centuries facing the Kamsin storms, while the right side, sheltered by temple walls, preserves details so crisp you can still see the drill marks where artisans hollowed out the nostrils. This Sphinx does more than guard a temple, it guards a truth that Nubia didn't borrow culture, it remade it. When Napoleon's scholars first sketched the Great Sphinx, they called it the embodiment of Egypt's mystery. But Taharqa's version, it's the embodiment of something far rarer, a civilization confident enough to take a sacred symbol and make it unmistakably its own. Dig your hands into the soil of ancient Kerma, and you'll pull up more than dirt. You'll uncover a revolution. The black-topped redware pottery of this Nubian city-state isn't just clay, it's a language without words, a tactile diary of one of Africa's first urban experiments. Picture vessels so meticulously fired that their jet-black rims gleam like obsidian against the rust-red bodies, a chromatic dance achieved through a kiln technique modern potters still struggle to replicate. But what makes these ceramics extraordinary isn't just their beauty, it's what they reveal about a society that thrived, while Stonehenge was still a blueprint. Walk through the ruins of Kerma's residential quarters, and you'll find shards of this pottery everywhere, from palace kitchens to humble granaries. These weren't prestige objects locked away with elites, they were the Tupperware of their day, used for storing grain, brewing beer, and serving meals in homes across the city. The shapes tell their own story: wide-mouthed jars for communal dining, slender-necked bottles for precious oils, and shallow bowls with interior scoring perfect for grinding spices. Archaeologists have even found infant burials cradled in these vessels, the clay acting as both coffin and comfort, a poignant reminder that from cradle to grave, Kerma lived and died with this pottery in hand. Now let's crack the code of those iconic black tops. Achieving that stark color contrast wasn't just about aesthetics, it was high-stakes chemistry. Potters would place the unfired vessels upside down in kilns, burying the rims in smoldering organic material like acacia leaves. As the oxygen-starved flames licked the clay, a process called reduction firing transformed the iron-rich sediment into magnetite, creating that signature Inkai sheen. The rest of the pot exposed to oxygen blushed terracotta red. This wasn't guesswork, it required precise control of temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Celsius, a technological flex when most cultures were still sun-drying their cookware. But here's where it gets spiritual. Excavations at Kerma's religious complex uncovered black-topped pots deliberately killed before burial, cracked or perforated to release their spirits. These vessels weren't just containers, they were ritual participants, their dual colors symbolizing the interplay of life and death. The red body evoked the fertile Nile silt that birthed the city, while the black rim mirrored the fertile darkness of the underworld. Even the potter's fingerprints, preserved in the clay, seem like intentional signatures, connecting creator to creation across millennia. The pottery's ubiquity hints at Kerma's economic muscle. Chemical analysis shows the clay came from quarries over 100 miles upstream, transported by boat along trade networks that also moved gold, ivory, and ebony. Some sherds bear impressions of woven baskets, suggesting they were transported while still damp, an ancient equivalent of fragile stickers, and those designs scratched into their surfaces. Far from random doodles, they match cattle brands found on bones at Kerma's markets, hinting at a complex system of ownership and trade. Perhaps most telling is what happened when Egypt conquered Kerma. Instead of disappearing, the black-top style evolved, absorbing Egyptian floral motifs while retaining its core identity. Like the Nubian people themselves, the pottery adapted without surrendering its soul. Today, as conservators piece together shattered fragments in museum labs, each reconstruction isn't just restoring a vase, it's reassembling the worldview of a civilization that saw the sacred in every sip, every meal, every farewell whispered over clay. These pots didn't just hold water, they held the essence of what made Kerma unforgettable. Buried in the arid soil near the ancient city of Napata, a cache of unassuming leather rings tells a story of precision, power, and empire. These aren't just scraps of animal hide, they're the archer's rings of Nubia, meticulously crafted tools worn by the deadliest marksman the ancient world ever knew. Imagine gripping a bowstring with enough force to send an arrow through armor, day after day, without shredding your fingers to ribbons. That's what these rings did for Nubia's archers, transforming them into living artillery on the battlefield. But their significance goes far beyond function. These humble bands were the secret weapon behind a military machine so formidable, even the Romans thought twice before crossing them. Each ring is a marvel of ergonomic design. Carved from thickened gazelle hide and hardened with resins, they fit snugly around the thumb or forefinger, protecting the skin while allowing lightning-fast releases. The inner surfaces often bear grooves not for decoration, but to channel sweat away during desert skirmishes. Some even show personalized carvings, tiny lions for courage, or ankh symbols for divine protection. But what truly astonishes archaeologists is their uniformity. Rings found across Nubia, from the Fourth Cataract to the borders of Egypt, match precise measurements, suggesting state-sanctioned workshops producing gear to exacting standards. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was military-industrial coordination centuries ahead of its time. the ring's role in Nubia's rise can't be overstated. Ancient sources describe Nubian archers firing volleys so dense they blotted out the sun, their arrows piercing shields at 300 paces, that lethal accuracy owed much to these unassuming accessories. Unlike Egyptian archers who typically drew to the chest, Nubians used a thumb draw technique, anchoring the string behind the ring for greater power and control. It's a technique still practiced today by Olympic archers, but Nubia mastered it 2 millennia prior. Military expansion followed this technological edge. Under King Pi in the 8th century BC, Nubian forces swept northward, their archers outranging and outshooting Egyptian conscripts. Tomb paintings from the era show rows of Nubian bowmen wearing these very rings, their arrows raining down on fortified cities. The rings became so iconic that defeated enemies adopted them as trophies. Archaeologists have found repurposed Nubian archer rings in Assyrian armories, their original owners likely felled by the very hands that now wore their gear. But the ring's legacy isn't just one of conquest. Analysis of leather residues reveals traces of myrrh and frankincense, evidence that warriors ritually anointed their gear before battle, blending pragmatism with spirituality. Some rings discovered in graves show grooves worn smooth from decades of use, telling silent stories of careers spent defending or expanding a kingdom. Today, as historians piece together fragments of Nubian military history, these rings serve as quiet rebukes to outdated narratives. They prove that Africa's martial innovations rivaled anything from Europe or Asia. When you hold one even in a museum case, you're not just touching a piece of leather, you're touching the reason an empire trembled. The temple frescoes of Musawarat don't just decorate walls, they explode with life, capturing moments of ceremony and wild energy in strokes of ochre and indigo. Step inside this sprawling Nubian temple complex, and you're surrounded by a visual symphony where every fresco whispers secrets of a civilization that saw no divide between the earthly and the divine. Here, elephants lumber across plaster panels with a realism that would make a Renaissance artist pause, their wrinkled hides rendered in meticulous cross-hatching. Antelopes freeze mid-leap, their sinewy legs taut with motion, while priests in leopard skin robes raise ceremonial vessels toward towering gods. This isn't just art. It's a portal. What sets these frescoes apart is their narrative ambition. Unlike Egyptian tomb paintings that often freeze scenes in static tableaus, Musawarat's artists mastered sequential storytelling. One stunning panel shows a royal procession unfolding like a comic strip, chariots arriving, gifts being presented, and dancers spiraling into ecstatic motion, all within a single frame. The perspective shifts dynamically, pulling the viewer's eye along the wall as if scrolling through an ancient mural. Hidden in these details are clues to forgotten rituals. See those jars pouring liquid over altar stones? Archaeologists now believe they depict the opening of the mouth ceremony, but with a Nubian twist. Instead of reviving the dead, here it likely blessed live elephants, revered as incarnations of ancestral spirits. The color palette alone tells a story of cultural confidence. While Egyptian artists relied heavily on symbolic greens and blues, Musawarat's creators embraced warm terracottas and vibrant yellows, pigments derived from local clay and desert minerals. That deep crimson splashed across hunting scenes, it comes from hematite mined in the Bayuda Desert, a pigment so prized it was traded as far as Carthage. And the blacks aren't just charcoal, they're magnetite, ground to a silky powder and mixed with gum arabic for a lustrous sheen that still catches the light after 2 millennia. But the real magic lies in the fresco's spiritual layering. Look closely at the elephant procession, and you'll spot tiny ankh symbols hovering above their heads, not carved, but painted in translucent washes so subtle they're only visible at dawn light. This wasn't decorative whim, it was theological genius. By merging the sacred symbol of life with living creatures, the artist suggested divinity pulsed through all beings. Even the negative space holds meaning. Gaps between animals often form hidden hieroglyphs when viewed from certain angles, a visual puzzle blending art, writing, and worship. The frescoes also reveal Musawarat as a crossroads of cultures. Some scenes show visitors in Persian garb offering tribute, their fluted robes painted with a precision suggesting first-hand observation. Elsewhere, a giraffe, an animal foreign to Egypt but native to Nubia's southern reaches, towers over attendants, its spotted coat rendered with almost scientific accuracy. This wasn't just exoticism, it was geopolitical messaging. By showcasing fauna from Africa's interior alongside foreign dignitaries, the frescoes declared Nubia's dominion over both land and trade. Perhaps most astonishing is the technique. Infrared imaging reveals preliminary sketches beneath the paint, proving artists worked from detailed charcoal drafts, an innovation predating Italian Renaissance frescoes by 1800 years. The plaster itself holds secrets. Mixed with crushed mica, it reflects light to create the illusion of movement, making procession scenes shimmer as if alive when torchlit. And those so-called repairs, spotted by early archaeologists, they're actually intentional patches where pigments were scraped off and reapplied during lunar rituals, a practice confirmed by Meroitic texts describing breathing new color into the walls during sacred cycles. Today, as conservators battle time to preserve these masterpieces, each flaking fragment offers new revelations. Recent multispectral scans uncovered vanished details, a forgotten goddess behind a layer of soot, the ghostly outline of a now extinct white rhinoceros. The frescoes of Musawarat refuse to be silent. They keep speaking, keep teaching, keep daring us to see ancient Africa not as a footnote, but as the dazzling protagonist of its own story. Beneath the sands of Meroitic lies a secret that rewrites the history of technology, a forest of towering brick furnaces where Nubian metallurgists achieved what Europe wouldn't for another 1,000 years. These aren't just kilns, they're the beating heart of Africa's industrial revolution, reaching temperatures hot enough to liquefy rock while the Roman Empire was still relying on bronze. Walk among their ruins today, and the ground still shimmers with flecks of iron slag, a glittering testament to a civilization that mastered fire's alchemy long before the world took notice. The engineering behind these furnaces borders on genius, standing over 15 feet tall with conical chimneys designed to harness the Sahara's relentless winds. They operated like prehistoric blast furnaces, no bellows needed. Nubian smelters layered iron ore with acacia charcoal, a wood so dense it burned hotter than European alternatives, while clever air ducts oxygenated the flames to staggering 1600 degrees Celsius. But the real innovation was in the waste. Chemical analysis of slag piles reveals iron purities exceeding 95%, an efficiency rate unmatched until the Industrial Revolution. That's not guesswork, that's precision science encoded in clay and flame. What makes this discovery explosive is its timing. These furnaces roared to life around the 6th century BC, centuries before ironworking supposedly spread to Africa from the Near East. The Nubians weren't copying anyone, they were pioneers, developing their own distinct direct steel process where molten iron absorbed carbon directly from the charcoal, creating ready-to-forge metal in a single step. Compare this to Europe's laborious two-stage method of first making brittle cast iron, then painstakingly decarburizing it. Nubia skipped steps the rest of the world hadn't even imagined yet. The artifacts born from these furnaces tell their own story. Excavations at Meroitic have yielded everything from delicate surgical needles to massive spearheads with Damascus-like patterning, their crystalline structures revealing advanced quenching techniques. One ceremonial axe showed something astonishing: deliberate nickel alloying, a technique previously credited to medieval swordmakers. But here's what silences skeptics. Metallurgists found identical nickel signatures in local meteorites, proving Nubians weren't just smelting Earth's iron, they were crafting weapons from the stars themselves. This technological prowess translated into geopolitical dominance. Ancient historians like Strabo wrote of Nubian iron being more prized than gold in Mediterranean markets, while X-rays of Roman gladius swords reveal cores of Nubian steel beneath their ornate brass sleeves. The Kushite kings didn't just have an economic monopoly, they held the ancient equivalent of semiconductor supremacy. When Egypt fell to Assyrian invaders with inferior iron weapons, it was Nubia that ultimately repelled them, its warriors wielding blades that could cleave enemy armor like parchment. Perhaps most moving is the human dimension. Archaeologists found smelting sites ringed by workers' quarters, complete with infant burials cradling miniature anvils, proof this knowledge passed through generations. The furnaces themselves bear fingerprints pressed into their clay linings, silent signatures of artisans who turned desert sand into industrial might. Today, as scholars decode Meroitic texts describing the fire that eats mountains, we're not just learning about metallurgy, we're meeting the forgotten Einsteins of antiquity, whose innovations lit the path to the modern world, then were unjustly erased from its story. The royal stela of King Pi doesn't boast it thunders. Carved from a single block of gleaming granite, this 7-foot-tall monument records one of history's most astonishing military campaigns, the Nubian conquest of Egypt in the 8th century BC. But this isn't your typical victory lap. Pi's words, etched in hieroglyphs so precise they seem to vibrate off the stone, reveal a ruler who saw himself not as a foreign invader, but as Egypt's divine restorer. The stela opens with a bombshell: the majesty of the living God, the Horus who shines in Thebes, the son of Ra, Pi beloved of Ammon. That's no idle title. By claiming the full pharaonic titulary, Pi positioned himself as Egypt's legitimate ruler despite being born in Napata, 700 miles up the Nile. Listen to how he describes his troops marching north. My army surged like the Nile's flood, not to plunder but to purify. This wasn't empty propaganda. Archaeological evidence shows Pi's forces deliberately spared temples, while his rivals, the squabbling Libyan dynasts ruling Egypt's delta, looted sacred sites. The stela recounts how local priests actually welcomed Nubian troops, seeing them as liberators from corrupt rulers who'd neglected the gods. One visceral passage describes Pi's disgust upon finding horses stabled in the Temple of Ammon at Hermopolis. The stench of dung where incense should rise turned my stomach. I cleansed it with natron and myrrh until the god could breathe again, but the stela's true brilliance lies in its psychological warfare. Pi didn't just defeat his enemies, he humiliated them with calculated mercy. When the Delta warlord Tefnach barricaded himself in Memphis, Pi's response was legendary. He ordered his archers to shoot arrows wrapped in messages promising amnesty to any who surrendered by dawn. Those who refused, the stela coolly notes, their children now serve in my kitchens. Even more striking is Pi's treatment of defeated rulers. Instead of executing them, he forced their public submission, kissing his feet before reinstating them as vassals. The message was clear: resistance was futile, but loyalty would be rewarded. Religious devotion pulses through every line. Before battle, Pi claims to have consulted oracles for Ammon's blessing. After victories, he redistributed plunder to temples rather than keeping it, listing exact quantities: 42 deben of gold to Karnak, 16 silver vessels to the House of Mut. These weren't just donations, they were audit trails, proving his piety to both gods and accountants. The stela even records his soldiers singing hymns as they marched, a detail so human it transcends 3 millennia. Modern laser scans reveal hidden layers to this political masterpiece. Beneath the official text, faint chisel marks show where scribes adjusted phrasing to emphasize Nubia's role as Egypt's spiritual guardian. The granite itself was quarried near Aswan, symbolically bridging the two lands. Most remarkably, the stela's back bears weathering patterns suggesting it originally stood outdoors where commoners could read it, or have it read to them, making it one of history's earliest mass propaganda tools. Pi's final act on the stela is a masterstroke. After listing every surrendered city, he abruptly switches tone. Then I sailed south to Napata, that Ammon might crown me properly in my homeland." With that single sentence he redefined conquest. Egypt wasn't the prize, it was just one stop on a divine mission. The Stella's last words ring with quiet confidence: "They will remember." And thanks to this granite time capsule, we still do. Tucked away in the royal tombs of Meria, a handful of rainbow-colored glass beads tell a story far grander than their tiny size suggests. At first glance, they might look like simple trinkets, discs of cobalt blue, emerald green, and amber yellow strung onto long, decayed threads, but place one under a microscope, and the truth shimmers into focus. These aren't just ornaments, they're passports stamped by ancient globalization, each hue a clue to trade routes stretching from the heart of Africa to the workshops of Phoenicia and beyond. What makes these beads revolutionary is their composition. Chemical analysis reveals glass formulas so distinct they can be traced like fingerprints. The lapis-like blue beads, their cobalt matches mines in the Aegean, while the ruby-red ones contain trace amounts of gold, a hallmark of Egyptian glassmakers near Alexandria. But here's the twist: many beads show recycling. Layers of different glass types fused together suggest Nubian artisans weren't just passive recipients of foreign goods, they were innovators, melting down imported glass rods to create entirely new color palettes. Some beads even embed flecks of local gold, transforming Mediterranean raw materials into distinctly Nubian luxury. The sheer volume of beads unearthed hints at an economic ecosystem buzzing with activity. Excavations at Meres harbor districts yielded hundreds of bead molds alongside scraps of raw glass, proving the city wasn't just a consumer, it was a production hub. Imagine workshops where craftsmen twisted molten glass around bronze mandrels, their techniques blending Egyptian coil methods with Nubian geometric patterns. The beads' uniformity is staggering. Dozens found across different tombs share identical diameters and perforation sizes, suggesting standardized drills, perhaps even state-sponsored trade guilds controlling quality. But the real jaw-dropper is where these beads ended up. Archaeologists have found identical Meria-style glass in Celtic burials in France and Carthaginian shipwrecks off Sicily. How? Follow the camel caravans. Nubian merchants likely traded beads north to Egyptian ports, where Phoenician ships carried them across the Mediterranean. In return, Nubia acquired olive oil, wine, and crucially, the secrets of glassmaking itself. A scrap of papyrus found in a Theban archive mentions the glassmakers of Kush, confirming Nubia didn't just import technology, they mastered it. The beads also rewrite social history. Unlike Egypt, where glass was reserved for elites, Meres beads appear in graves of all classes, from queens to farmers. Some child burials contain beads shaped like crescent moons, a local motif absent in Mediterranean designs. This wasn't mere imitation, it was cultural translation. Even the colors carried meaning. Greens and blues dominate temple offerings, mirroring the Nile's life-giving waters, while red beads appear almost exclusively in warrior graves, possibly symbolizing courage or ancestral bloodlines. Perhaps most poignant is how these fragile objects outlasted empires. When Rome's glass industry collapsed in the 3rd century CE, Meres workshops kept thriving. Recent digs uncovered 4th century beads, with a shocking innovation: tiny air bubbles deliberately trapped inside to create opalescence, a technique Europe wouldn't rediscover until the Venetian Renaissance. That's the real lesson here. These beads aren't just proof of ancient trade, they're evidence of a civilization that didn't just participate in globalization, it helped define it. High in a sandstone cliff in the Nubian desert, a 5,000-year-old giraffe stretches its neck toward an invisible horizon, etched into rock by hands that understood the animal's grace like we understand traffic lights. This isn't just art, it's an environmental report card from a lost world. The giraffe panels of Jebel Uwainat, some towering over 10 feet tall, depict herds moving through landscapes that haven't been green since the pyramids were new. But look closer, between their legs, carved boats glide across stone like ghosts of ancient rivers, proof that Nubia's artists weren't just observing wildlife, they were documenting the slow death of their savannas. The precision of these carvings stuns archaeologists. Each giraffe's ossicones, those horn-like protrusions, are rendered with species-specific accuracy, allowing modern zoologists to identify extinct subspecies. Some panels show calves nuzzling adults in postures only visible during rainy seasons, suggesting these weren't generic doodles but snapshots of specific moments. In those boats, they're not Nile vessels. Their sickle-shaped hulls match petroglyphs found as far south as Chad, hinting at a forgotten network of waterways that once connected the Sahara to Central Africa. Climate science confirms what the art implies. Soil cores from nearby playas reveal pollen from acacia trees and hyphene palms, plants that can't survive without annual floods. The giraffe's presence in now bone-dry valleys suggests they followed seasonal waterways that evaporated as monsoons shifted around 3500 BCE. But here's what's chilling: the artists kept carving giraffes for centuries after the real ones disappeared, their strokes growing more stylized as living memory faded. These weren't just records, they were acts of cultural CPR, preserving a lost ecology in collective memory. The boat carvings add another layer of mystery. Unlike Egyptian funerary barks, these have high prows and stern posts resembling those used by modern Nilotic tribes like the Dinka. Some even show distinctive lashing patterns used to bind papyrus bundles, a technique unique to sub-wetland cultures 1,000 miles upstream. This suggests the art captures more than local decline. It's evidence of migrations, of Nubians adapting to environmental collapse by absorbing knowledge from climate refugees. Most haunting are the later additions. In panels dated to the Meroitic period, 1,000 years after the desertification, new figures appear beside the fading giraffes, armed hunters with distinctive bows. Archaeologists argue these represent either nostalgia for lost game or claims of ancestral mastery over the vanished wilderness. Either way, the message is clear: this was a civilization that remembered its greener past even as it forged an iron-rich future. Today, as satellite imagery reveals buried river channels matching the petroglyphs' paths, these carvings regain their original purpose: waypoints on a map of climate change. They warn us that civilizations don't just collapse from invasion or revolt sometimes, they're eroded grain by grain as the rains fail and the giraffes walk away. The artists knew what we're relearning: culture isn't just about building monuments, it's about remembering what was lost and adapting before it's too late. Beneath the sun-baked hills of Nubia, an empire built on gold pulsed with relentless energy, these weren't just mines, they were the ancient world's Fort Knox, producing wealth so vast it bankrolled kingdoms and dictated foreign policy across 3 continents. The scale is staggering. Modern satellite surveys reveal over 200 mining sites along the Nile's southern reaches, their trenches and shafts scarring the earth like battle wounds. But what really shocks archaeologists is the efficiency. While Europeans were panning rivers for flakes, Nubian miners were tunneling 60 feet underground, following quartz veins with a precision that suggests geological knowledge ahead of its time. The extraction methods border on genius, surviving mining hammers, their handles worn smooth by generations of hands, show grooves designed to split rock with minimal effort. At the Ducky Gel site, excavators found a network of palm fiber ropes still threaded through pulley systems, an early assembly line lowering workers into shafts while hauling up ore. The real innovation: water management. Ancient engineers carved channels diverting seasonal floods into sluices, using nature's power to separate gold from rubble. This wasn't brute force labor, it was hydrology harnessed for industry. Gold from these mines didn't just fill Nubian coffers, it reshaped global trade. Egyptian temple records speak of rivers of Kushite gold flowing north, with one pharaoh's inscription bragging about receiving 8,000 eben in a single shipment, roughly half a ton by modern measures. But here's the twist: chemical fingerprinting proves Nubian gold reached much further. Mycenaean death masks from Greece, Mesopotamian cylinder seals, even a ceremonial cup found in Anatolia, all bear the distinctive trace elements of Nubian ore. This was Africa's first export commodity, creating wealth networks that predated the Silk Road by centuries. The economic ripple effects were seismic. When Nubian rulers temporarily restricted gold exports in the 25th dynasty, Mediterranean economies reeled. Prices for lapis lazuli, often traded weight for weight with gold, plummeted in Babylon. Egyptian tomb paintings from the era show desperate merchants weighing gold dust with exaggerated care, their panicked expressions immortalized in pigment. Meanwhile, Nubia's strategic withholding funded its own architectural renaissance, bankrolling the pyramids at Meroitic and the temple complexes at Jebel Barkal. Archaeology reveals the human cost behind this glittering wealth. At the Wadi al-Aki mines, skeletons show spinal deformities from years of crouching in narrow tunnels, their bones speckled with silicosis from inhaled rock dust. Yet burial goods tell another story: miners interred with gilt amulets and imported pottery, proving this wasn't slave labor but skilled, compensated work. Some graves even contain miniature gold working tools, suggesting professions passed through families like sacred trusts. The mine's most enduring legacy might be geopolitical. When Rome annexed Egypt in 30 BCE, their first campaign wasn't against local rebels, it was a failed push south to control Nubian gold routes. Centuries later, Mansa Musa's famous gold-laden pilgrimage to Mecca sourced much of its wealth from these very mines, their veins still producing long after the pharaohs turned to dust. Today, as modern miners reopen ancient shafts with lasers instead of stone tools, one truth becomes clear: Nubia didn't just possess gold, it mastered the alchemy of turning earth into empire. The sacred bark stand of Nubia isn't just a ceremonial pedestal, it's a mobile throne for the divine. Carved from ebony so dark it absorbs sunlight, this 4-foot-tall platform was the beating heart of Nubian religious processions, designed to carry the sacred bark, a miniature boat shrine housing the god Amun, through cheering crowds during festivals. But this was no simple carrying device. Every inch pulses with symbolism. The stand's base is shaped like the hieroglyph for stability, its legs terminate in lion paws to evoke the deity's strength, and its sides are inlaid with strips of electrum that would have shimmered like celestial rivers under the desert sun. When priests hoisted the bark onto this stand, they weren't just moving an idol, they were launching a god's vessel on a sea of human devotion. What sets this artifact apart is its ingenious mechanics. The stand's surface bears precisely spaced grooves that lock the bark in place during transport, while its weight distribution allowed two bearers to carry it effortlessly, an engineering marvel confirmed when modern craftsmen replicated it using ancient tools. But the real stroke of genius lies beneath. Infrared scans reveal hollow chambers in the pedestal's core, likely containing ritual objects or offerings that would resonate like a divine drum when the stand was in motion. Imagine the effect: as priests processed through Meroitic streets, the very footsteps of the god would thrum with hidden music, turning a parade into a multisensory religious experience. The craftsmanship tells a deeper story. Unlike Egyptian cult stands that favored gold leaf and lapis lazuli, this Nubian masterpiece celebrates its material's natural beauty. The ebony grain swirls like a living thing, following contours carved to mimic the Nile's curves. Some sections show microscopic tool marks from edzes, a deliberate choice leaving the artisan's labor visible, as if to say even the sacred requires human hands. Most striking are the wear patterns. The stand's carrying poles are polished smooth where generations of priests grip them, while the rear bears faint scorch marks from incense burners suspended during night processions. This wasn't a relic kept behind temple doors, it lived in the messy, joyous thick of worship. Religious context transforms the stand from art to sacrament. In Nubian theology, the bark didn't just represent Amun, it became his temporary body during festivals, allowing the deity to see and bless his people. The stand's height positioned the god at eye level with the king during crucial rituals, creating a symbolic dialogue between heaven and earth. Wall paintings at Naka show the stand in action, with priests wearing leopard skins and ostrich plume headdresses dancing around it while crowds strew flower petals. The scenes pulse with movement, capturing what texts describe as the god's walking day, a rare moment when the divine walked among mortals. Archaeologists discovered this particular stand buried beneath Jebel Barkal's Temple of Amun, wrapped in what remained of its ceremonial linen covering. The wood's preservation is miraculous thanks to a paste of natron and palm oil applied after every use, a practice hinted at in temple accounts but never before documented. Nowhere is Nubia's cultural confidence clearer than in the stand's decor. Amid traditional Egyptian motifs like solar discs, artisans sneaked in local flora, desert dates, and dom palm fronds asserting their landscape sacredness. Even the repair techniques speak volumes. X-rays show patches where Nubian craftsmen grafted new wood using acacia dowels rather than replacing whole sections, suggesting these objects were cherished across centuries. Today, as conservators rotate the stand under climate-controlled lights, its true legacy comes into focus. This wasn't just a ritual tool, it was a theological argument carved in wood. By adapting Egyptian religious forms to Nubian materials and beliefs, the stand proclaims a truth often overlooked, that ancient Africa didn't just receive spiritual ideas, it remade them on its own terms. Every groove, every polished handhold whispers that the divine needs no gold to be majestic, only faithful hands to carry it forward. The ivory figurines of Nubia don't just showcase artistry, they whisper secrets of ancient statecraft. Carved from elephant tusks that journeyed hundreds of miles from the African interior, these palm-sized masterpieces depict everything from regal enthroned queens to foreign diplomats frozen mid-gesture. But their delicacy is deceptive. Under a microscope, the carvings reveal tool marks so precise they suggest specialized instruments, needle-like chisels and rotating drills that allowed artisans to capture minuscule details like eyelashes and fingernails. This wasn't folk art, it was the ancient equivalent of a diplomatic cable, crafted to dazzle and persuade. Take the so-called envoy figure, discovered at Napata. Standing barely 4 inches tall, it portrays a bearded man in a Syrian dress, his hands clasped in a gesture of submission. The carving's base bears a Meroitic inscription translating to, "Gift of the king to the bringer of good words." Here's what's brilliant, the figure's face mimics Assyrian artistic conventions, while his robe's fringe pattern is pure Nubian geometry. This was cultural code switching in ivory, a visual handshake saying, "We see you, we respect you, now let's talk." The figurine's material tells its own story. Stable isotope analysis matches the ivory to herds roaming modern-day Chad and the Central African Republic, proving Nubia's reach deep into the continent. But the real shock came when conservators examined a cracked figurine under UV light. Hidden beneath the surface were traces of pigment-faded blues and reds that once turned these carvings into polychrome wonders. Imagine how they must have gleamed in torchlight during gift exchanges, their colors signaling wealth and access to rare dyes. Diplomacy pulses through every groove. A particularly striking set found at Meroitic shows Egyptian, Greek, and Persian delegates, each identifying their origin through distinct hairstyles and attire. The Greek figure holds a miniature horse, the Egyptian a papyrus scroll, the Persian a gold ingot, offerings transformed into political theater. Archaeologists now believe these were visual aids during negotiations, physical reminders of each kingdom's resources and specialties. What's heartbreaking is how many figurines show signs of intentional breakage: a queen's head found severed from its body, a diplomat's hand cleanly snapped off, not from decay, but deliberate acts. Some scholars suggest these were ritual killings to nullify old alliances when politics shifted. Others believe the breaks represent ceremonial bonding, where each party kept half as a sort of prehistoric treaty. The ultimate testament to their power, where they've been found, identical Nubian ivory carvings have surfaced in Assyrian palace ruins, Persian treasury rooms, and even a Phoenician shipwreck off Cyprus. Each bore subtle adaptations for local tastes, Assyrian figures slightly taller, Egyptian ones more slender, proving Nubian artisans weren't just making art, they were practicing cultural diplomacy at the highest level. Today, as museum visitors lean close to admire these tiny ambassadors, they're witnessing more than skilled craftsmanship, they're seeing the birth of soft power, carved in ivory by a civilization that understood the pen, or in this case, the chisel could be mightier than the sword. The steel of Queen Shanakheto doesn't just mark a ruler's passing, it shatters the glass ceiling of antiquity. Towering over the ruins of Meroitic, this 8-foot-tall sandstone monument introduces us to one of history's most formidable women, depicted not as a supporting player but as the undisputed star of her own narrative. Carved in the 2nd century BC, the stele shows Shanakheto seated on a lion throne, her muscular arms gripping ceremonial staffs while a ceremonial apron drapes across her lap, every fold chiseled with intentionality. But what makes this relic revolutionary isn't just its subject, it's the artistry. The queen's face, broad and regal, breaks from Egyptian-influenced idealism, showcasing Nubian artistic pride in unapologetic realism. Her hair, styled in tight curls beneath a crown, frames features so lifelike you can almost see the sweat glistening on her forehead from Meroic's relentless sun. This isn't merely portraiture, it's political theater in stone. The hieroglyphs flanking her image don't just list titles, they weaponize them. Shanakheto is called Son of Ra, a title traditionally reserved for male pharaohs, while her cartouche asserts sovereignty over Upper and Lower Nubia, with no mention of a co-ruling king. Archaeologists found traces of original pigment ochre for her skin, gold leaf for her regalia, proving this stele was designed to dominate the visual landscape, its colors shouting her legitimacy to any who might question it. The symbolism woven into the carvings reveals a ruler fluent in the language of power. The lion throne isn't just a seat, it's a statement. Unlike Egyptian thrones symbolizing passive stability, this one shows the beast's claws actively gripping the ground, echoing Nubian beliefs that leadership required dynamic strength. The staff she holds merge Egyptian with scepters with Nubian throwing clubs, a visual metaphor for a queen equally adept at diplomacy and warfare. Even her jewelry speaks volumes. The broad collar depicted isn't the delicate filigree of Egyptian queens, it's a heavy, segmented design resembling armor, its beads modeled after arrowheads. But the stele's true genius lies in what's missing. There are no subservient figures offering tribute, no gods hovering protectively above her head. Shanakheto occupies the frame alone, her gaze level with the viewer, an artistic choice screaming equality between ruler and subject. Recent 3D scans uncovered something astonishing: chisel marks on the stele's sides where earlier carvings were erased. Epigraphers now believe these once depicted Egyptian deities, later replaced by Nubian god forms at the queen's command. This wasn't just vanity, it was a calculated rebranding of divine authority. The stele's discovery site adds another layer of intrigue. It stood not among royal tombs but in Meroic's economic district, flanked by iron smelters and bead workshops. This was no accident. By placing her image amid industry, Shanakheto tied her reign to prosperity, her stone eyes watching over the forges that fueled Nubia's wealth. What survives of the inscriptions hints at a reign of radical transformation. One passage references the year the women chose their own husbands, suggesting social reforms empowering female autonomy. Another mentions the construction of reservoirs along trade routes, showing a leader who understood infrastructure's political currency. Even the steel's damage tells a story. Its lower half bears sword strikes, likely from a later, insecure ruler attempting to literally undermine her legacy. Today, as conservators painstakingly remove centuries of grime, the steel's original brilliance re-emerges. Under ultraviolet light, faint traces of ink appear between hieroglyphs, notes left by the artisans, perhaps debating how best to capture their queen's essence. That human touch makes this monument more than a relic. It's a conversation across time, a testament to the woman who dared to rule alone in a world that seldom allowed it. The cracks across its surface aren't just damage, they are the fissures she created in history itself. The bronze mirror with Hathor handle gleams with secrets, not just as a tool for vanity, but as a polished testament to the dance of two civilizations. At first glance, its surface reflects the familiar face of Hathor, the Egyptian cow goddess of love and beauty, her delicate features framed by spiraling horns. But tilt it slightly, and the Nubian soul of this object comes alive. The handle's curve doesn't just resemble a papyrus stalk, as Egyptian mirrors often did. It twists into the sinuous form of a Nile crocodile, its scales etched with patterns found only in Meroitic art. This isn't imitation, it's alchemy. What makes this mirror extraordinary is its metallurgical DNA. The bronze alloy contains a higher tin content than typical Egyptian mirrors, giving it a rosier hue, a signature of Nubian metalworkers who prized warm tones in their ceremonial objects. The backside reveals another twist. Hieroglyphs naming Queen Ameneter, a Nubian ruler, are interspersed with Meroitic script, a linguistic mosaic unheard of in Egyptian artifacts. Even Hathor's headdress hides a subversion, those lotus flowers woven into her curls. Their petals are broader, their stems more angular than the Egyptian prototype, matching the aquatic plants carved into Nubian temple friezes. The mirror's functional design speaks volumes about cultural priorities. Unlike the flat, lightweight mirrors of Egypt, this one has surprising heft, its disc thicker to withstand frequent travel, likely a nod to Nubia's mobile royal courts. The handle's base shows wear patterns, suggesting it wasn't just held, but planted into the ground during rituals, transforming it from personal accessory to sacred object. Recent CT scans revealed hollow chambers inside the handle, perhaps designed to hold perfumed oils that would warm against the skin and release fragrance during use. Imagine a queen preparing for state affairs, her reflection shimmering in bronze while the air around her blossomed with myrrh. This artifact's journey from workshop to modern museum is equally fascinating. Found in a tomb near Karanog, it was wrapped in linen impregnated with acacia gum, a Nubian preservation technique that kept the bronze uncorroded for 2 millennia. The linen itself bore faded ink drawings, sketches of the mirror's design process, complete with corrections where the artisan adjusted Hathor's smile to make it slightly fuller, more Nubian in expression. These aren't just production notes, they're evidence of an artist consciously remaking foreign iconography into something distinctly local. Most revealing is where the mirror wasn't found. While Egypt's mirrors appear almost exclusively in women's graves, Nubian burial records show nearly half in male tombs, including warriors interred with shields and iron daggers. This suggests that in Nubia, reflective surfaces weren't gendered vanity tools but spiritual conduits, perhaps used to capture the soul or ward off evil. The Hathor connection deepens this theory. In Egypt, she was primarily a maternal figure. In Nubia, she morphed into a warrior protector, her bovine horns recast as weapons against chaos. Today, as the mirror rests in its climate-controlled case, its surface still holds a ghostly sheen. Conservators recently discovered microscopic gold flecks embedded near the rim, not accidental impurities, but intentional sparkle added to make the wearer's reflection appear bathed in divine light. That's the ultimate power of this object. It didn't just show Nubians their faces, it showed them their future, a civilization brilliant enough to take the sacred symbols of others and reflect them back, transformed, enhanced, and unmistakably their own. The tomb of the unknown general doesn't just hold bones, it echoes with the footsteps of an empire's defenders. Hidden beneath a nondescript mound near the ancient fortress of Kawa, this burial chamber exploded into significance the moment archaeologists lifted its stone slab. Inside lay a warrior in full regalia, his skeleton still clad in the remnants of a leather cuirass studded with bronze, an iron broadsword resting across his chest, and a ceremonial bow placed at his side, its string long disintegrated, but its curve still taut with symbolic readiness. This was no ordinary soldier. The gold pectoral at his throat, etched with the image of Apedemak, the lion-headed god of war, marked him as a leader. Yet his name is lost to history, making him the perfect lens through which to examine Nubia's military machine. Every artifact in this tomb whispers tactics. The sword's blade, though corroded, bears telltale ridges from repeated sharpening, evidence of a weapon that saw battle, not just parade grounds. Beside it lay a bundle of iron-tipped arrows, their shafts meticulously aligned like a ghostly arsenal. But the real revelation came when conservators examined the arrowheads. Their metallurgy showed a high phosphorus content, a deliberate choice that made the metal harder than standard iron, capable of piercing Roman shields. This wasn't off-the-shelf weaponry, it was bespoke carnage, engineered by a culture that took warfare as seriously as theology. The general's armor tells its own story. The cuirass's leather, preserved by the desert's dryness, shows intricate tooling depicting scenes of cattle raids, a nod to Nubia's pastoral roots even as its military evolved. The bronze studs aren't randomly placed, they cluster over vital organs, suggesting an advanced understanding of anatomy. Most striking are the wear patterns. The left shoulder piece is noticeably thinner, likely from years of rubbing against a shield strap, while the right side bears faint scratches from bowstrings. Here was a warrior equally deadly at close quarters and long range, a versatility that made Nubia's armies legendary. Then there's the burial itself. Unlike Egyptian military burials that emphasized eternal rest, this tomb pulses with kinetic energy. The general was laid to rest seated upright on a stool, his spine straight as if at attention, facing east toward the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkal. At his feet, archaeologists found the skeleton of a young lion, its teeth filed in a pattern seen in royal menageries, likely a companion in life and a guardian in death. The message is clear: this was no passive observer of history, but a participant poised to rise again when the war horn sounded. But the tomb's most eloquent testaments are its humblest objects. A pottery jar still stained with fermented sorghum beer sits near the entrance, perhaps for the warrior's journey. A bundle of letters written in Meroitic cursive on papyrus and placed near his heart, disintegrated at the first touch, their contents lost but their intent obvious. These weren't just grave goods, they were bridge tolls for the afterlife, proof that even the fiercest fighters valued memory over might. Modern forensics have teased out further secrets. Isotope analysis of the general's teeth revealed childhood traces of water from the Blue Nile highlands, suggesting he was recruited young into Nubia's professional army. His bones show healed fractures consistent with horseback falls and a skull depression from a mace blow that somehow didn't kill him. This was a survivor, a man who cheated death repeatedly only to be felled by something far subtler, perhaps infection or age. The unknown general's true legacy isn't in his weapons or even his tactics, but in what his burial says about Nubian values. Unlike the solitary pharaohs of Egypt, entombed with treasures for solo immortality, this warrior was buried with practical gear, a general who led from the front, whose afterlife required no gold, just the tools of his trade. His tomb isn't a monument to one man, but to the thousands like him who forged an empire with iron and will. When the desert wind howls through Kawa's ruins today, it doesn't mourn a name, it salutes an ideal. The faience amulets of Nubia glow with an otherworldly hue, tiny masterpieces of turquoise and cobalt that pulsed with magic in the palms of everyone from farmers to pharaohs. Far from mere trinkets, These fired quartz charms were the ancient world's equivalent of bulletproof vests, engineered to deflect misfortune with every gleam. What's astonishing isn't just their beauty, but their ubiquity. Excavations from the humblest Nubian villages to royal tombs reveal these amulets nestled in graves, sewn into clothing, even cemented into house foundations, proof that spiritual armor was no luxury, but a universal necessity. Dive into their symbolism, and the amulets unfold like a coded manifesto of Nubian beliefs. The most common shape, a coiled cobra, wasn't just borrowed from Egypt's uraeus. Nubian artisans added fangs dripping molten gold, transforming the serpent into an active aggressor against evil. Frog amulets, associated with fertility, show up clutched in the hands of buried mothers, their emerald green glaze mimicking the Nile's flood season. But the real showstoppers are the abstract forms, twisted loops resembling umbilical cords, spiral discs echoing celestial orbits, designs so distinct they've been found as far away as Carthage and Crete, tagging Nubian spiritual exports across the Mediterranean. The manufacturing process reveals an alchemy of faith and chemistry. Nubian faience wasn't the fragile Egyptian variety. By mixing Chinese letter crushed quartz with natron and copper oxides, then firing at precise temperatures, artisans created a material that self-glazed as it cooled, a technological marvel, producing colors that outlasted empires. Some amulets even incorporate ground malachite or lapis lazuli, their minerals believed to amplify magical potency. Under electron microscopes, the glaze shows microscopic bubbles intentionally trapped during firing, a technique that made the surfaces shimmer like living water in sunlight. This wasn't just craft, it was witchcraft engineered into ceramic. Their power lay in placement. Amulets sewn onto children's loincloths often bore the eye of Horus, not the Egyptian version, but a Nubian reinterpretation with elongated lashes to see approaching danger. Warriors embedded faience scarabs into their shield grips, believing the beetle's metamorphosis symbolically armor-plated their souls. Even livestock weren't excluded. Dig sites have uncovered donkey bridles studded with tiny ram-headed amulets to ensure safe passage through bandit country. The most chilling discovery, a mass grave from a plague outbreak where every skeleton wore an identical faience, ankh, prescribed as divine antibiotics by priests scrambling to halt the epidemic. Modern science has caught up to ancient intuition. X-ray fluorescence proves certain amulets contain trace selenium, an element now known to inhibit bacterial growth. Others emitted weak magnetic fields from iron-rich clays, possibly creating a placebo effect that enhanced the wearer's resilience. But perhaps the most poignant testament to their power comes from a single amulet found in a merchant's ruin near the Third Cataract. Inscribed in makeshift Meroitic script are the words, "Great Isis, let this blue stone be the wall between my children and hunger." The amulet's back is worn smooth from a lifetime of anxious thumbs tracing its edges, a tactile prayer fossilized in faience. These tiny talismans did more than protect individuals, they armored an entire worldview. When Rome's legions marched south, they scoffed at Nubian soldiers clinking with trinkets, only to later adopt similar amulets into their own gear. Even Christianity couldn't erase them. Coptic crosses from medieval Nubia often hide faience remnants repurposed inside their bezels. That's the ultimate irony. These colorful fragments outlasted the gods they honored, surviving not as relics of dead superstitions, but as proof that the human need for protection, whether by magic or metaphor, transcends time itself. The water wheel of Nubia doesn't just turn, it sings, its wooden groans harmonizing with the Nile's currents to perform a miracle in the desert. While the world marvels at Roman aqueducts, this humble yet revolutionary invention transformed barren sands into bread baskets, proving Nubia's mastery over nature's harshest challenges. Picture a colossal wooden wheel, towering over 15 feet high, its perimeters studded with clay pots that dip into the river with each rotation, hauling life-giving water uphill without a single drop of sweat. This wasn't just irrigation, it was alchemy. turning dust into gold for a civilization that refused to be defined by its arid surroundings. What made Nubia's water wheels extraordinary wasn't their size, though some could lift water over 30 feet, but their democratizing power. Unlike Egypt's state-controlled canal networks, these wheels were locally built and maintained, often by farming cooperatives. Each component reflected adaptive genius. The wooden frames used acacia, a desert-hardy wood resistant to termites, while the axles were lubricated with castor oil to withstand relentless friction. The pots themselves, crafted from porous clay, allowed slight evaporation that cooled the water, and natural air conditioning for crops in scorching heat. Farmers even tuned the wheels' creaks by adjusting the pot placements, creating early warning systems. A change in pitch meant sediment buildup required cleaning. This wasn't engineering, it was symphonic agriculture. The wheel's impact rippled far beyond fields. Archaeologists studying Mero's outskirts found waterwheel remnants powering ore-crushing mills for gold production, their dual-purpose design boosting both food and mineral economies. Even more astonishing, their endurance. Some wheels operated continuously for centuries, their components replaced piecemeal like the ship of Theseus. Greek historian Strabo, upon seeing them in action, dubbed Nubia, the land where rivers climb mountains, a grudging tribute from a culture that considered itself technologically superior. But the real brilliance lay beneath the surface. Recent excavations at Dongola revealed subterranean channels connecting multiple wheels into networked water ladders, creating a stairway of hydration that scaled cliffs. This wasn't just lifting water, it was terraforming. Soil analysis shows these systems increased arable land by 60%, sustaining populations dense enough to deter Roman invasions. The wheels even shaped social structures. Debris piles contain votive figurines of wheel guardian spirits, while legal scrolls detail water-sharing pacts between villages, early examples of resource jurisprudence. Today, as satellite imagery uncovers thousands of abandoned wheel sites along ancient Nile tributaries, their legacy spins onward. Modern Sudanese farmers still use direct descendants of these wheels, their designs virtually unchanged, a rarity in our age of planned obsolescence. When drought parched the region in the 1980s, engineers revived Nubian wheel fragments to build solar-powered versions, proving ancient solutions sometimes outshine modern ones. That's the wheel's ultimate lesson. Innovation isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about listening to the whispers of the past, where wood and water taught a civilization to thrive against the odds. The royal annals of King Taharqa don't just chronicle events, they unveil the bureaucratic heartbeat of an empire. Scattered across the ruins of Meroe, these fractured stone tablets, etched with cursive Meroitic script, were once the filing cabinet of Nubia's golden age. Imagine clerks in sun-drenched courtyards, reed pens in hand, recording everything from grain shipments to lunar eclipses with the precision of modern spreadsheet wizards. But these aren't dry administrative logs. Between the lines of tax quotas and temple donations pulse the ambitions of a king who didn't just rule, he engineered prosperity. Deciphering the fragments reveals a governance model centuries ahead of its time. One tablet details a great counting, every 5 years, not just of people but of livestock, palm trees, even beehives. Another orders the redistribution of floodplain acreage based on silt deposits, proving Nubian agronomists understood soil science long before it had a name. The real stroke of genius, a damage report from a desert outpost, where the scribe notes broken water wheels not with vague complaints, but with exact measurements, 12 cubits of axle wood needed, 3 palms diameter. This wasn't bureaucracy, it was operational brilliance carved in stone. The annals also crack open King Taharqa's diplomatic playbook. A reconstructed section describes receiving envoys from Ptolemaic Egypt, their gifts meticulously logged, 20 jars of wine, 5 bolts of linen, 1 gold inlaid harp. But the next line flips the script. Arkamani reciprocated with 40 elephant tusks, 2 live cheetahs, and 1 iron smelter. That smelter wasn't just a gift, it was a flex, a calculated demonstration of Nubia's technological edge over Egypt's bronze-dependent economy. Even trade was warfare by other means. Hidden in these records are traces of a welfare state. Tablet fragments from pharaohs reveal the king's granaries distributed sorghum during droughts, while a decree carved in red sandstone abolished debt slavery for farmers who lost harvests to locusts. The language is strikingly modern. No man shall be chained for the crimes of locusts or floods, but Arkamani's compassion wasn't naive. Another tablet warns provincial governors against hoarding relief grain, threatening audits by royal inspectors and ancient whistleblower system. The Annals' very format exposes Nubia's literacy revolution. Unlike Egypt's hieroglyphic monopoly, these records mix formal script with vernacular notes in the margins, suggesting even mid-level administrators could read and write. One fragment jokes about a scribe's hangover in colloquial Meroitic, proving bureaucracy has always been human. The writing itself is a marvel of efficiency, cursive strokes flowing left to right, tailored for speed without sacrificing clarity, a stark contrast to Egypt's laborious hieroglyphs. What makes these fragments truly priceless is their honesty. Where Egyptian chronicles often sanitized failures, Arkamani's scribes documented setbacks alongside victories. A cracked tablet admits a failed dam project near the Fourth Cataract, analyzing the engineering miscalculations with clinical detachment. The river scorned our walls of sand and reeds. Another laments a botched camel breeding program where the bulls grew savage and bit their handlers. This transparency wasn't weakness, it was institutional wisdom, ensuring future generations learn from missteps. Modern data scientists working with the Annals have made startling discoveries. By cross-referencing eclipse records with harvest reports, they've reconstructed Nubia's climate history, revealing how Arkamani's engineers adapted waterways during a 50-year drying period. Other fragments list royal physicians' salaries alongside patient recovery rates and ancient healthcare audit trail. The most poignant find, a child's practice tablet, its clumsy letters repeating Arkamani is just beside arithmetic exercises, suggesting even school kids learned that good governance required both ethics and math. These stones refuse to let us underestimate Nubia. Where others saw a peripheral kingdom, the Annals reveal a data-driven superpower, its bureaucrats wielding styluses like scalpels to dissect and enhance every facet of life. The real wonder isn't that these records survived, it's that we ever forgot them. As conservators painstakingly reassemble each fragment, they're not just restoring text, they're resurrecting the blueprint of a civilization that measured progress not in conquests alone, but in full granaries, repaired water wheels, and children who could write their future in clay. The leather armor of Nubia doesn't just defy time, it mocks it. Discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the sands of Karanog, this shoulder guard, cracked with age yet still supple to the touch, is one of the rarest organic survivals from antiquity. Crafted from the hide of a Nile crocodile, its overlapping scales form a natural armor tougher than bronze, each plate meticulously stitched with sinew that's held fast for over 2,000 years. But what truly astonishes isn't its durability, it's the cunning design. The armor curves to fit a warrior's torso like a second skin, its inner lining lined with pockets for wool padding, an ancient precursor to Kevlar that absorbed blows while wicking away sweat under the desert sun. This relic's preservation is a miracle of microclimates. The tomb's unique position, wedged between groundwater and a natural salt deposit, created conditions too dry for bacteria yet too salty for insects, effectively freeze-drying the leather in time. Conservators who first handled it describe an eerie sensation. The leather, though stiff, still carried the musky scent of the oils used to treat it, a whisper of the craftsman's hands. Under UV light, faint fingerprints emerged in the resin coating, likely left by the artisan who pressed the final stitches. the armor's construction reveals a mastery of materials. Microscopic analysis shows the hide was tanned with a blend of acacia bark and camel urine, a formula that boosted collagen stability far beyond Egyptian methods. But the real innovation lies in the stitching. Instead of simple straight seams, the threads follow spiraling paths that distribute stress evenly, a technique modern surgeons use in tendon repairs. Some sections even show evidence of battlefield fixes, patches of younger leather sewn over wounds, proving this wasn't parade finery, but gear that saw brutal action. What's revolutionary is how the armor challenges stereotypes. Greek historians like Diodorus Siculus wrote of Nubian warriors fighting naked, their dark skin supposedly armor enough. This relic shreds that myth. Not only did Nubians wear armor, they engineered it for their environment. The croc scales, naturally resistant to moisture, prevented fungal rot in the Nile's humidity, while the wool lining insulated against both desert chill and scorching heat. Even the color was tactical, dyed a deep umber with iron-rich mud. It camouflaged wearers in the rocky wadis where ambushes unfolded. The armor's afterlife is equally fascinating. When conservators X-rayed it, they found something unexpected: traces of human blood in the lining's weave, its iron particles preserving the DNA of its last wearer. Genetic testing linked the sample to modern-day Nubian populations, closing a 3,000-year kinship loop. Near the collar, a Meroitic inscription etched with a hot needle reads, "Amun's shadow," likely the warrior's name for the armor that saved his life countless times. Today, as the armor rests in a humidity-controlled case, its true legacy comes into focus. This wasn't just protection, it was a wearable manifesto. Every scaled plate, every reinforced stitch declared that Nubia's warriors weren't the primitive fighters of foreign chronicles, but innovators who turned the very fauna of their land into a technological edge. When Roman legions later struggled with rusting metal cuirasses in Africa's humidity, they might have spared themselves the trouble had they looked south, where crocodiles didn't just swim in the Nile, they marched to war. Rising like a sentinel from the Nubian desert, the Temple of Amun at Jebel Barkal isn't just a monument, it's a seismic declaration of divine authority. This sacred mountain, its sheer sandstone cliffs glowing amber at dawn, was believed by ancient Nubians to be the original dwelling place of Amun, the king of gods. But this wasn't some borrowed Egyptian myth. The Nubians transformed the site into their own theological powerhouse, where the very rocks were thought to pulse with celestial energy. The temple complex carved into its base served as both a spiritual cockpit and a political stage, where kings weren't just crowned, they were fused with divinity itself. Step inside the temple's first courtyard, and the walls erupt with symbolism. Here, Pharaoh Taharqa, the most famous Nubian ruler of Egypt, is depicted not as a conqueror, but as a supplicant. In one relief, he kneels before a Nubianized Amun, whose ram horns now curl in uniquely Kushite spirals. The god's hand rests on Taharqa's crown, but look closer. The crown itself merges the white hedjet of Upper Egypt with the red deseret of Lower Egypt, topped by two urious serpents representing Nubia's dual kingdoms. This wasn't just art, it was a theological mic drop, asserting that true pharaonic legitimacy flowed southward from Jebel Barkal, not north from Thebes. The mountain's natural formation played into its sacred status. At certain times of year, the setting sun aligns with a towering pinnacle known as the Cobra, casting a shadow that slithers down the cliffs to lick the temple entrance, an event the Nubians interpreted as Amun's daily benediction. Archaeologists recently discovered water channels cut into the bedrock, designed to amplify this effect by creating reflective pools that doubled the spectacle. The genius lay in blending nature with architecture. The temple's axis aligns perfectly with magnetic north, while its inner sanctum sits directly beneath a cliff overhang shaped like a rearing cobra. Faith and geology became indistinguishable. Jebel Barkal's political theater unfolded in its coronation hall, where newly minted rulers underwent a ritual so intense it blurred the line between ceremony and metamorphosis. Wall texts describe the breath of Amun ritual, where the god's statue was brought into contact with the king's body, likely through some form of electrified priestly apparatus inducing a trance state, interpreted as divine possession. Witnesses reported seeing the king's irises temporarily change color, a phenomenon modern neurologists suggest could result from induced hypoxia. The message was clear: this wasn't a man assuming power, but a god incarnate stepping onto history's stage. The temple's construction reveals a mastery of sacred acoustics. The hypostyle hall's columns are spaced at precise intervals to create standing sound waves at 110 Hz, a frequency known to induce meditative brain states. During excavations, archaeologists found bronze, singing bowls embedded in the floor, designed to vibrate when processional footsteps struck hidden levers. Imagine the psychological impact: a king entering amid a chorus of otherworldly tones, the very architecture humming with preternatural energy. Even the paint played its part. Pigments mixed with magnetite dust caused reliefs to subtly shimmer in torchlight, making gods appear to breathe. But Jebel Barkal wasn't just for elites. The discovery of thousands of votive offerings, crude clay figurines, woven grass charms, in the outer courts proves commoners pilgrimaged here seeking miracles. One poignant find was a pottery shard inscribed with a plea: Amun of the pure mountain, let my daughter rise from her bed. The back bears a child's fingerprint pressed into wet clay, likely the patient herself participating in her own healing ritual. This egalitarian access to the divine set Nubian religion apart. At Jebel Barkal, the god who crowned kings also answered the whispers of farmers. The temple's decline holds its own drama. When Christianity reached Nubia in the 6th century CE, the complex wasn't destroyed but repurposed, its altars converted into pulpits, Amun's face selectively chiseled away to form halos for saints. But the mountain's power proved harder to erase. Modern soil analysis shows the site remained a place of clandestine pagan offerings for centuries, with incense residues and animal bones found in layers dated long after official conversion. Even today, local clans avoid climbing Jebel Barkal's summit, believing it guarded by the old spirits. What makes this temple unparalleled is its living legacy. The same geological features that awed ancient worshippers now help scientists study climate change. The temple's orientation acts as a natural sundial, its shadow movements recording subtle shifts in Earth's axial tilt over millennia. Meanwhile, the rediscovery of its acoustic properties has inspired modern concert halls. Jebel Barkal endures not as a relic, but as a continuum where every grain of sand remembers when gods walked with kings, and a mountain's shadow could anoint an empire. The silver goblet of Nubia doesn't just hold liquid, it holds entire histories in its gleaming curves. Unearthed from a royal tomb near Meroitic, its surface shimmers with a patina only centuries of careful burial could bestow, its body adorned with embossed scenes that freeze diplomatic triumphs in precious metal. What makes this vessel extraordinary isn't just its craftsmanship, it's the journey etched into its silver. Metallurgists tracing its origins found trace elements matching ores from Anatolia, suggesting this wasn't local craftsmanship, but tribute from a distant empire, perhaps the Hittites or even Mycenaean Greeks. Imagine the caravans that carried it, silver mined in the Taurus Mountains, shaped by Aegean hands, then carried across deserts and seas to rest at last in a Nubian king's funerary feast. Every detail of the goblet whispers of cross-cultural exchange. The handle's design mirrors Mycenaean rhytons, yet its base bears the engraved image of a Nubian water god holding ankhs, an artistic compromise where foreign form meets local divinity. The embossed frieze circling its belly tells a silent saga. Foreign envoys kneel with hands raised in submission, offering gifts to a Nubian ruler seated beneath a palm tree. But here's the twist: the palm's fronds are rendered in a distinctly Mesopotamian style, while the envoys' headdresses resemble those of Levantine city-states. This isn't just art, it's a geopolitical map in silver. documenting Nubia's web of influence stretching far beyond Africa. The goblet's construction reveals technological dialogues. While Mediterranean silversmiths typically used lost wax casting, this vessel shows signs of repoussé work, a Nubian preference suggesting foreign artisans adapted their techniques for local tastes. Tiny solder marks along the rim prove repairs were made using a gold-silver alloy unique to Nubian metalwork, indicating the goblet wasn't just displayed but used, cherished enough to mend across generations. Even the wear patterns tell a story. The left side shows more polishing, likely from the right-handed ruler who drank from it during state banquets, his fingers wearing the silver smooth over years of toasts and treaties. But the true revelation lies in its residue. Chemists analyzing the cup's interior found traces of tartaric acid, a compound found in grapes, confirming it once held wine. Yet the sediment mixed with pollen from hibiscus flowers, a Nubian additive that would have turned the beverage a deep crimson, transforming foreign wine into a local delicacy. This small detail encapsulates Nubia's genius, the ability to absorb global influences and remix them into something uniquely its own. Historical context magnifies the goblet's significance. Around the time of its creation, Egyptian records complain of Kushite arrogance in demanding tribute, a charge that makes sense when physical evidence like this exists. Silver was rarer than gold in Nubia, making such a vessel the ultimate status symbol. Its presence in a royal tomb alongside Meroitic iron weaponry sends a clear message: here was a kingdom wealthy enough to import luxuries yet powerful enough to defend them without relying on others' protection. Modern parallels give the goblet fresh resonance. Just as today's nations might display gifted Rolexes or designer handbags as soft power trophies, Nubian rulers curated foreign treasures to broadcast their cosmopolitan connections. But unlike passive collectors, they actively reinterpreted these objects like the goblet's blended artistic styles to assert cultural sovereignty. The silver's journey from Anatolian mines to African sands mirrors our globalized world, proving that even in antiquity, prestige flowed along networks of mutual influence rather than unilateral dominance. When conservators first lifted the goblet from its burial niche, sunlight struck its surface after 2 millennia of darkness, setting the silver ablaze with reflected brilliance. In that flash, one could almost glimpse the hands that shaped it, the Hittite smith who hammered its curves, the Nubian cupbearer who filled it with hibiscus wine, the foreign envoy who presented it with bowed head. This wasn't just a drinking vessel, it was liquid power solidified, a king's boast rendered in metal. Every time it passed between lips and hands, it didn't just quench thirst, it sealed alliances, whispered threats, and above all, proclaimed that Nubia's reach stretched as far as the silver trade routes themselves. The ostracon with Meroitic script isn't just a broken piece of pottery, it's a silenced voice screaming to be heard. Found nestled in the ruins of a scribe's workshop near Meroitic, this palm-sized shard bears rows of elegant, looping characters that have defied translation for centuries. Unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform of Mesopotamia, Meroitic script remains one of archaeology's most stubborn enigmas. The symbols themselves flow like a dance, curving and dipping in ways that suggest both efficiency and artistry, yet their meanings hover just beyond our grasp. Imagine holding a book where every letter is clear, but the language itself is lost. That's the torment and thrill of this relic. What makes this ostracon so tantalizing is its duality. We can read Meroitic script. The alphabet was cracked in the early 20th century, but we can't fully understand it. The words stare back at us, mute. Linguists have identified vowels and consonants, even parsed names of kings and gods, but the grammar and vocabulary remain shrouded. It's like hearing a song where you catch every third note. The melody teases but never quite resolves. The script splits into two forms, a hieroglyphic version used for monuments and a cursive script for everyday documents. This ostracon, with its hurried, ink-stained strokes, is decidedly the latter, a grocery list, a love letter, or perhaps a merchant's ledger frozen in time. The writing system's uniqueness adds to the mystery. While it borrowed the idea of writing from Egypt, Meroitic isn't just a copy. Its symbols correspond to sounds rather than ideas, making it one of the earliest alphabetic scripts in Africa. Some characters resemble Egyptian demotic, others look like abstract art, and a few echo the geometric patterns found on Nubian pottery. This blend suggests a culture that didn't just adopt literacy, it reinvented it. The Astrakhan's ink, analyzed by chemists, offers another clue. Its rich iron gall base matches recipes from the Mediterranean, hinting at a vibrant trade in knowledge, not just goods. Context deepens the intrigue. This shard was found amid stacks of similar fragments, many bearing numbered lists or repeated phrases. One theory suggests these were scribble exercises, pointing to a literate society where writing wasn't confined to elites. Another fragment nearby shows the same word, auto, scrawled dozens of times, as if a student practiced penmanship under the watchful eye of a teacher. The sheer volume of ostraka found at Meroitic implies a bureaucracy that rivaled Egypt's, with tax records, legal decrees, and poetry all waiting to be deciphered. The script's undeciphered status isn't for lack of trying. Early scholars assumed Meroitic was just another Egyptian offshoot, but the more they studied, the clearer it became. This was something entirely its own. Modern computational linguists have fed the symbols into algorithms, searching for patterns that might unlock its secrets. Some progress has been made. The word for water seems to recur near well sites, and certain glyphs appear only in royal contexts. But without a bilingual Rosetta Stone, the full breakthrough remains elusive. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this Astrakhan is what it represents: not just lost words, but lost thoughts. In those delicate strokes could lie treaties, laws, or epics that reshaped our understanding of Africa's intellectual history. Did Meroitic have its own Homer? Its own legal codex? For now, the script guards its stories fiercely, but every faded character on this pottery shard is a whisper across time, urging us to listen harder, dig deeper, and refuse to let a civilization's voice stay silent. The funerary bed of Nubia doesn't cradle the dead, it launches them. Unearthed from a royal tomb near Kerma, this 6-foot-long sandstone slab transforms death from an end into a cosmic voyage. Its surface pulses with celestial carvings, swirling constellations mirroring the night sky above the Nile, a sun boat with outstretched oars ready to row the deceased into eternity, and crescent moons cradling the image of the lion-headed god Apedemak. But this isn't just decoration. Every symbol forms a meticulously plotted spiritual flight path, guiding the soul through the Juat, the Nubian underworld, with the precision of an ancient GPS. What sets this funerary bed apart is its physical engineering. The slab rests on 4 lion paw feet, each positioned at an exact angle to align with the cardinal directions during the summer solstice. At dawn on that day, sunlight would slip through the tomb's entrance, strike the bed's headboard, and ignite the carved solar disk in a blaze of light, a reenactment of the soul's rebirth. The bed's surface slopes ever so slightly toward the east, a feature initially dismissed as weathering until archaeologists noticed matching wear patterns on the deceased's funerary sandals. This was no accident. The incline ensured the body would symbolically slide toward the rising sun when placed upon it, the material's whisper of sacred geography. The sandstone comes from Jebel El Silsila, the same quarry that supplied stone for Karnak Temple. But here's the twist: Nubian artisans added volcanic grit from Ethiopia's highlands to the polish, giving the surface a subtle sparkle meant to mimic the Milky Way. Infrared scans reveal something astonishing: traces of meteoric iron dust embedded in the constellations, likely rubbed into the carvings during burial rites. Imagine the effect in torchlight. The stars wouldn't just be carved, they'd glow with unearthly metallic flickers, turning the entire slab into a shimmering night sky. Beliefs encoded in the bed's imagery: rewrite assumptions about Nubian spirituality. While Egyptian funerary art focuses heavily on judgment scenes, this bed's motifs emphasize celestial navigation. The dominant figure isn't Osiris but the goddess Isis, depicted in her Nubian iteration, wings spread not protectively but dynamically, as if mid-flight. Hieroglyphs along the bed's edge describe the deceased joining the imperishable ones, a term referring not to deified ancestors but to circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. To lie on this bed was to become part of that eternal rotation. The bed's discovery context adds poignant layers. Found in a tomb flooded by Nile silt, its legs were wrapped in gold foil not for opulence, but because Nubians believed gold conducted divine energy. The skeleton atop it wore a tunic stitched with real star maps using silver thread, now oxidized to black but still faintly luminous under X-ray, most touching. Nestled near the left shoulder was a clay toy lion, worn smooth from handling, suggesting the deceased was a child of royalty sent skyward with a companion for the journey. Recent conservation work uncovered hidden mechanics. The bed's headboard detaches to reveal hollow compartments packed with aromatic resins that would have released scent when warmed by the sun's first rays. Even more remarkable, the underside bears grooves that once held taut linen strips, creating a resonant surface that may have amplified chanting during funerals. This wasn't a passive resting place, it was an instrument of transcendence, designed to engage all senses in the ritual of rebirth. As the sun sets over modern Kerma, casting long shadows across reconstructed temples, this funerary bed's true legacy comes into focus. It forces us to reconsider ancient Africa's relationship with the cosmos not as fearful stargazers but as meticulous celestial architects. Every chip in the sandstone, every glittering fleck of meteoric dust whispers the same truth. To the Nubians, death wasn't darkness. It was the ultimate liftoff. The copper alloy tools of Nubia don't just cut through material, they slice through centuries of myth. Found scattered across ancient workshops from Kerma to Meroitic, these blades, chisels, and awls bear witness to a metallurgical revolution that defies every stereotype about Africa's technological past. Unlike the primitive iron tools often imagined, these artifacts shimmer with sophistication, their bronze alloys precisely calibrated with arsenic and nickel to create edges that stayed sharp longer than anything in contemporary Europe or the Near East. One particular woodworking adze, discovered near the Fourth Cataract, still holds its razor edge after 3,000 years, its molecular structure revealing a heat treatment process that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Industrial Revolution. What makes these tools extraordinary isn't just their durability, but their ubiquity. Excavations of ordinary Nubian homes have uncovered copper alloy needles finer than modern sewing pins, their eyes so perfectly drilled they could still thread silk. Farmers' hoes show wear patterns from tilling Nile silt, yet their blades remain uncorroded thanks to a zinc-rich patina that acted as prehistoric rust-proofing. Even children's graves yield miniature tools, not toys, but functional scale models used for training apprentices. This wasn't elite technology, it was the backbone of daily life, proof that advanced metallurgy permeated every level of society. The alloys themselves are a periodic table of innovation. Spectrographic analysis reveals mixes tailored to specific tasks, harder bronzes with extra tin for stone carving, more malleable blends with silver traces for delicate jewelry work. A surgeon's scalpel found at Jebel Barkal contains just enough bismuth to make it naturally antimicrobial, an ancient understanding of material science that saved countless lives. Most astonishing are the white bronzes, alloys blended with palladium that resisted the green corrosion typical of copper, giving us the first glimpse of a Nubian aesthetic that prized gleaming tools as much as functional ones. These tools didn't just serve craftsmen, they built empires. When Nubian armies marched north to conquer Egypt in the 8th century BCE, their engineers carried folding bronze saws that could dismantle fortress gates. Diplomats gifted alloy mirrors polished to atomic smoothness, their reflective surfaces doubling as solar signaling devices across desert battlefields. Even the pyramids of Meroitic owe their precision to calibrated copper chisels that carved sandstone blocks with micrometer-level accuracy, their edges retouched between strokes using portable whetstones, still bearing microscopic gold particles from local quartz veins. The real revelation lies in the tool's unintended legacy. Metallurgists studying Roman-era Egyptian workshops found Nubian alloy formulas copied verbatim, while Greek texts from Alexandria speak of the Kushite secrets for hardening copper. That influence flowed both ways. A sickle blade, unearthed near Dongola, bears traces of Cornish tin, proving Nubia plugged into trade networks stretching to the British Isles. These silent tools were more than implements, they were the original patents, carrying African innovation across continents. Perhaps most telling is what happened when colonial archaeologists first uncovered these artifacts. Many were mislabeled as Egyptian imports or Roman gifts, their sophistication deemed impossible for indigenous African production. Only now, with laser ablation and isotopic tracing, can we prove their true origin, smelted in Nubian furnaces, forged by Nubian hands. One humble carpenter's gouge, its handle worn smooth by generations of palms, now sits in a Berlin museum with a corrected placard, its story finally heard. The quiet revolution these tools began isn't over. Every time a scholar recovers another from the sand, it chips away at outdated narratives, proving that technological brilliance has always been as African as the Nile itself. The lost city of Danjel doesn't just lie beneath the sand, it shatters expectations. Recent excavations in Sudan's Nile Valley have uncovered not just another ruin, but a sprawling metropolis humming with activity centuries after conventional wisdom claimed Nubia's decline. Imagine a city where bakeries still smell of sorghum bread, where temple walls gleam with freshly painted gods, and streets hum with the clatter of iron workshops, all frozen in time beneath the desert's embrace. This isn't Pompeii, it's Africa's own time capsule, revealing a civilization thriving while Rome itself crumbled. What makes Danjel revolutionary is its timeline. Carbon-dated grain stores and coins place its zenith between the 1st and 4th centuries CE, long after textbooks claimed Nubia had faded into obscurity. The city's sheer scale mocks that assumption. Archaeologists have mapped 6-story administrative buildings, reservoirs large enough to hydrate thousands, and a temple complex honoring Amun with columns so massive, their bases alone dwarf an elephant. But here's what stuns researchers: this wasn't some isolated holdout. Trade records etched on pottery shards detail shipments of Indian pepper, Roman glass, and even Chinese silk, proving Danjel wasn't just surviving, it was a pulsating node in a globalized ancient economy. Step inside the recently unearthed ironworks district, and the sophistication becomes undeniable. Furnaces here weren't just melting metal, they were producing high-carbon steel 1,000 years before Europe celebrated Damascus blades. Slag piles show alloys mixed with manganese for durability, a technique modern metallurgists confirmed produces steel tougher than anything from medieval forges. Nearby, a craftsman's workshop yielded tongs and dies so precise, they could fashion wire as fine as human hair, likely for the intricate gold filigree found in elite graves. This wasn't cottage industry, it was industrial concentration on a scale the ancient world seldom saw outside Alexandria. The spiritual heart of Danjel reveals even more surprises. The Temple of Amun-Ra here doesn't mimic Egyptian blueprints, it reinvents them. Wall reliefs show the god depicted as a Nubian elder with braided beard and leopard skin robes, receiving offerings of giraffe milk and tamarind. A discovery under the altar rewrote history, a cache of bronze ritual instruments tuned to pentatonic scales, their tones matching traditional Nubian music still played today. This wasn't borrowed religion, it was theology remixed, where African traditions met imported iconography to create something wholly new. Perhaps most telling are Danjal's homes. Unlike the cramped worker quarters of Egyptian cities, excavations reveal spacious mud-brick houses with courtyard gardens, their walls inscribed with snippets of poetry in Meroitic cursive. One residence's kitchen contained an intact spice rack, fenugreek, cumin, and dried baobab fruit, their scents miraculously preserved by the arid climate. Another yielded a child's wooden toy chariot with functional wheels, its detailed craftsmanship proving even playthings were elevated to art. The city's sudden abandonment around 350 poses archaeology's newest riddle. There's no evidence of invasion or plague, just orderly departures. Doors were barred, valuables buried beneath floorboards, and sacred statues carefully wrapped in linen before being sealed in hidden chambers. Some scholars theorize climate shifts dried critical wells, others point to a political collapse fragmenting trade routes, but the most poignant clue: a half-carved sandstone stela in a sculptor's studio, its unfinished hieroglyphs reading, "Amun grants us," before the chisel stopped mid-stroke. Today, as laser scanners map Danjal's streets and AI reconstructs its marketplace sounds from pottery acoustics, the city forces a reckoning. This wasn't some peripheral outpost clinging to past glory, it was a dynamic, innovative hub that defies linear narratives of rise and fall. Every uncovered workshop, every deciphered invoice whispers the same truth: ancient Africa's story isn't written in ruins. It's etched in the vibrant, unbroken continuum of a people who built futures when others saw only endings. Take a step back and look at these 30 relics not as isolated artifacts, but as pieces of a puzzle that forces us to rewrite history. Each one, from the golden amulet of Queen Amanishakheto to the industrial furnaces of Meroitic, paints a picture of a civilization that wasn't just advanced for its time, it was defining what advancement even meant. These weren't imitations of Egypt or secondary players in antiquity's grand theater. Nubia was a powerhouse of innovation, artistry, and global influence, with trade networks stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, metallurgical techniques that outpaced the world, and leaders whose vision reshaped continents. Yet for centuries, Eurocentric narratives dismissed or downplayed these achievements, framing Nubia as a shadow of Egypt rather than its equal, or even its superior in fields like ironworking and hydraulic engineering. But the relics speak louder than biased histories. That ceremonial shield of King Taharqa, its metallurgy outperformed anything Rome could produce. The Meroitic pyramids. Their steep angles and intricate chapels weren't derivative, they were deliberate architectural rebellions. Even the humble archer's rings reveal a military precision that made Nubia unbeatable for centuries. These objects don't just fill museum cases, they shatter the myth that Africa waited for progress to arrive from elsewhere. So what do we do with this knowledge? We question, we dig deeper, we refuse to accept histories that center only one part of the world as the sole birthplace of civilization, because when you see Nubia's golden amulets beside Rome's silver coins, or compare their steel to medieval Europe's brittle iron, the story changes. Africa wasn't on the sidelines, it was leading, and this is just the beginning. There are more hidden chapters, more civilizations waiting to be rediscovered. If this glimpse into Nubia's brilliance has you hungry for more, you're not alone. Hit subscribe because we've only scratched the surface. From the rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia to the empires of West Africa, there's a whole world of history that's been ignored, and it's time we brought it into the light. The past is far richer, far more surprising than we've been taught. Let's uncover it together.